So, Governor, thank you for all you have done. Please know that we stand ready to help the state in any way we can. As New Yorkers and as citizens of the world, we are eager to hear about the newest piece of your environmental vision. Please join me in welcoming the 56th Governor of the great state of New York, Andrew Cuomo.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, it is a pleasure to be here at Columbia University. Pleasure to be with so many of my colleagues from the New York State Legislature, the Assembly, and the Senate. They are obviously here for the Vice President. I call a meeting, not this many show up. This is actually a quorum. We could actually pass legislation in this room. Anyone have any proposals? Our colleagues from the New York City Council, let's give them a round of applause. And as the President said, a special friend to Columbia, a special friend to me, a great national leader. It's always a joy to be with Vice President Gore. Let's give him a round of applause. And I'll have more to say about the Vice President in a moment. But it's relevant that we make this announcement here at Columbia because, as President Bollinger said, Columbia, besides being a great academic institution, really has been responsible when it comes to environmental matters. We're now partnering with Columbia University in building a 15-megawatt microgrid and cogeneration plant, which will reduce the cost of energy to the university. It will add to resiliency. It will also protect the environment. It's a very forward vision, and we applaud Columbia and President Bollinger for taking this kind of step. Let's give them a round of applause. And you couldn't have a better specific forum than the Earth Institute, which has been a pioneer in tackling global problems such as climate change, poverty, and disease by recognizing the interconnection and the connectivity among the problems and among the people globally. They really have done outstanding work. We all owe them a debt of gratitude to the Earth Institute. In my position as governor, you get to see the full scope and spectrum of the challenges that are facing society today. Many of the issues we work on are issues to improve society. We want a better education system. We want a better transportation system. We want a better economic system. We want a fairer justice system. But climate change is different. Climate change is not about making society better. Climate change is an issue of society's sustainability. To deny that climate change is real is to defy reason. I like to say that denial is never a successful life strategy. Well, in the case of climate change, denial is not a survival strategy. Current projections estimate that sea levels will rise 1 to 4 feet by 2100. If that is true, New York State would be devastated. It's that simple. Even at a fraction of that rise, Manhattan as we know it would be gone. Not to mention millions of people along the East Coast, which would be displaced, with hundreds of billions of dollars of real estate value disappearing. Besides the scientists' projections, our own practical experiences demonstrate a shift. I've been governor for 4.5 years, and I've had 9 weather-related emergencies in 4.5 years. My father was governor for 12 years, and he had 11. The emergencies during my father's term were basically heavy snowfalls. Nothing new, but they were worse, and they were dangerous. I have had hurricanes, tornadoes, floods in places where they never happened before. I've been in houses that have stood for over 100 years and never had a drop of water in the basement and are now washed away. 7 feet of snow fell at one time in Buffalo, an historic high in Buffalo, and that's saying something. Hurricane Sandy that we all experienced, which was just unprecedented. Climate change is a reality, and not to address it is gross negligence by government and irresponsible as citizens. We know what needs to be done, we just need the political will to do it. In New York, thanks to the leadership and the action of the New York State Legislature, we are well underway. We established the state's first carbon dioxide emission standards when siting new power plants, which will ensure no new dirty coal plants will be built in the state of New York, period. We are also repowering and converting or closing the existing coal plants. Working with our 9 Northeast Regional Greenhouse Cap and Trade Coalition, we reduced our carbon emissions cap by 45%. We're reducing energy consumption at state facilities by 20% by 2020. In 4 years, we have gone from less than a dozen public charging outlets for electric vehicles to over 1,200 today. We put solar panels on nearly 30,000 homes and businesses, and we'll do another 150,000 by 2020. We will install renewable energy, including solar, wind, and geothermal, on all state campuses by 2020. And we are challenging all private colleges to financially partner with us in doing the same. Mr. President, we have set the most aggressive carbon emissions target in the nation, with a mandate of reducing emissions by 40% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. Today, I am pleased to announce that we take the next step by signing the Under 2 Memorandum of Understanding, which commits New York State to a global effort to keep the Earth's average temperature from rising 2 degrees Celsius from the pre-industrial level benchmark. A UN panel on climate change determined that global temperatures must not increase by 2 degrees Celsius in order to avert a catastrophic impact of climate change, including sea level rise that would create extreme weather, cause mega droughts, and lead to food scarcity. We'll be joining 42 other jurisdictions in 19 countries on 5 continents that have made this same commitment. As UN climate negotiations, as UN climate negotiations begin in Paris this December, the powerful collective of signatories on the MOU are demonstrating the urgency of action and the importance of setting binding targets. World leaders must now follow suit. We also announced today that we understand that carbon markets are a powerful tool for reducing the pollution that is contributing to climate change. Small regional coalitions are not enough. Therefore, today I have directed my administration to reach out to our partners in other states, such as California, as well as the Canadian provinces, about building a broader North American market to collectively reduce harmful emissions. Hopefully, this will drive a national discussion to every state in the nation. In short, we can address climate change. We know how to do it. We can do it. We must just have the political will and the leadership to do it. And we must take the first step, and the first step is always deciding to do it and committing ourselves as a body politic to do it. It is just a question of commitment and of focus and of leadership. I'm proud to be governor of the state of New York, a state which is led on so many important movements, Just think about it. The women's rights movement started here in New York at Seneca Falls. The workers' rights movement started here in New York after the fire at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. The gay rights movement started here at Stonewall. The environmental movement started here on the Hudson River at Storm King. So many important movements started here. Our role is leadership, not just for the state of New York, but on progressive issues to show the way for the rest of the nation. E.B. White said, "New York is to the nation what the white church spire is to the village, the visible symbol of aspiration and faith, the white plume saying the way is up." If New York comes together, if we join together and commit ourselves to tackle climate change, we can show the nation what is possible. Let's lead by example. It's the best way to lead. It's the only way to lead. It is the New York way to lead, and today is a great step forward. Now, as you know, I spent 8 great years in Washington, D.C., working in the Clinton-Gore administration. And I had a great mentor and a great teacher when it came to the environment. Vice President Gore's leadership on this issue was early, it was educated, and it was prophetic. In 2007, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. A year earlier, he won an Oscar for his documentary, An Inconvenient Truth. I gave him the nickname at the time, Noble Oscar, which he did not appreciate. It's just a cultural difference in humor, I think. He has been a good friend to me on many levels. He was an extraordinary public servant when he served as vice president during those 8 years. He was an extraordinary senator before that. And if Al Gore had served as President of the United States, I have no doubt this nation would be in a better place for his service. When they write the history book of greats, Al Gore's name is going to be right at the top of the list. Ladies and gentlemen, give a big New York welcome to Vice President Al Gore.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Governor. Thank you very much. Boy, that was really over the top. I would have come here just to hear that. We lost the great former Speaker of the House, Jim Wright, a few months ago, and I think he was the originator of the saying. You've probably heard this, but after a really over-the-top introduction, he would say, "I wish my mother and father could have heard that introduction. My father would have enjoyed it, and my mother would have believed it." And speaking of mothers and fathers, even though some time has passed, I want to begin these remarks by once again honoring the memory of your dad, Governor. What a great American, a great teacher to us all. President Lee Bollinger, thank you for your hosting of this event and for your leadership on the climate issue. I get a chance to come to Columbia quite a bit. I want to acknowledge the Earth Institute folks and all of the faculty and students that might be here. And on a personal note, I want to mention that my daughter Corinna Gore is now head of the Center for Earth Ethics at Union Theological Seminary, part of the larger Columbia family, and one or two here. To the members of the state legislature and the city council and other elected officials, to the members of the governor's administration and the executive branch. Many of you worked hard on these issues, and I want to thank you and thank the legislature for the support and the leadership and vision that you have contributed to this. I've been doing this a long time. I was thinking of that when you were talking about some of the good times that we used to have. Whenever we get together, we're backstage. I don't know what it is, but we just end up telling jokes and laughing. And anyway, I was thinking about that and how long I've been at this. I said I've come to New York recently. I was at a restaurant. This is a true story. A woman came walking by in front of my table, just staring at me as she walked by. And I didn't really think anything of it, but out of the corner of my eye, a short time later, I saw the same woman coming from the opposite direction, just staring at me. And I said, "How do you do?" And she stepped forward. She said, "You know, if you dyed your hair black, you'd look just like Al Gore." And it's a true story. I said, "Thank you very much." And she said, "You sound like him too." It was very, very suspicious. The leadership shown by Governor Cuomo and New York State to make these bold emissions reduction commitments is vital to solving the climate crisis, especially now on the eve of the Paris negotiations, November 30th through December 11th. New York's efforts to reduce emissions and join with others like California, Quebec, and Ontario to accelerate the transition to a clean energy economy sends a very strong signal to world leaders. Local, regional, and state governments are taking climate action now. This is a big deal, and it does represent the kind of vision and leadership, no kidding, that I say no kidding because we're always joking with each other, and every time I look at him, I think I have to, when I'm saying something serious, this is really a big deal, and I am genuinely impressed and grateful. And what Governor Cuomo has done with the help of the elected officials in this state is truly extraordinary. You know, yesterday, California passed really important climate legislation, and the efforts on the West Coast now with New York State providing this additional burst of incredible leadership in the Northeast, we really do have the prospect of seeing the emergence of a North America market in carbon emissions and the instruments that will accelerate that decarbonization of our economy. I do want to put this in perspective just a little bit, because what the governor has announced today and the start of this process he has announced today should be seen in the context of so many of the steps he has already taken with the state energy plan, with the solar initiative. You know that new solar plan announced in Buffalo this week? Some of you may not realize this. I travel all over the world dealing with this issue. This means, among other things, that the world record for the most efficient solar panel made anywhere in the world, China, Japan, you name it, is going to be made right here in New York State. That is a big deal. And it's not a small factory, it's what they call a gigafactory. This is incredible. And by the way, green jobs in the United States, the year-over-year increase was 88%. It is the fastest growing category of new employment opportunities of any job category in the U.S. And New York State is now leading the way. So this is really significant to build up the economy at the same time we reduce emissions. The electric vehicle initiative, the New York Green Bank, it's quite a list. The Clean Power Plan, the plans for more resiliency in New York, and the Reforming Energy Vision. Now, some of these issues, I'm keenly aware, can seem impenetrably complex to so many that just, they know it's in good hands. They don't want to really have to spend a lot of time reading into the details. I want to take this opportunity just to read you something that was published this morning. Kind of a coincidence that it came out this morning, but I read all these climate bloggers and all the trade press and so forth. This is my day job, to fight the climate crisis. So there's a writer who's originally from Tennessee, it's how I first got to know him, named David Roberts. And there are a lot of good writers on the climate. This fellow writes for Vox, and if to the students here particularly, if you want to really immerse yourself in the details of climate policy, David Roberts would be a good person to follow. Here's what he published this morning. The headline is New York's Revolutionary Plan to Remake Its Power Utilities. I'm just going to read you a couple of excerpts from this. He notes that a lot of states are beginning to understand this historic transition from centralized, carbon-dependent electric utilities to the widely distributed, decentralized, renewable energy model, and all that sounds geeky, but it's a real big historic thing. The first electric generating station, of course, was on this island built by Thomas Edison back when the direct current couldn't go very far, and then Tesla also in New York came up with a new model of alternating current, and then it spread all over the country. And in 1999, the American Academy of Engineering had a big survey of all the engineers to determine, on the eve of the millennium, what was the single most important engineering achievement of the 20th century. And when they got the answer back, they said the U.S. electricity grid. It really is a remarkable achievement, and we owe a lot to the utility industry and to the coal industry. We got to take care of the miners because it's not their fault that they've been caught in this transition. We've got to take care of the miners. And we also have to pay careful attention to all the people who work for these central station utilities, and more about that in a moment. But anyway, we're seeing a real shift, and that designation is the greatest engineering accomplishment of the 20th century. The key phrase in that might just be 20th century, because now in the 21st century, everything is changing. And one of the most hopeful signs that I've seen anywhere in the world, and it's happening everywhere in the world, is that the scientists and engineers and entrepreneurs have figured out a way to bring down the cost of electricity from solar photovoltaics almost as fast as the cost of computer chips have come down. It's absolutely astonishing. Just 15 years ago, the best predictions for the expansion of solar electricity said we'll have 1 gigawatt per year by 2010. Well, 2010 came around and we beat that prediction by 17 times over. Last year we beat it 48 times over. This year we're beating it 62 times over. That's an exponential curve. It's just shooting right up through the roof, and it is creating jobs, and it's bringing the cost down as this new energy source goes to scale, and it's surpassing political boundaries. I was in Florida last week, Governor and Mr. President. I spent 3.5 days training another 1,200 climate activists from 86 countries, and by the way, it coincided with the supermoon, which caused the highest high tide of the year, the king tide. And I won't name any other governor, but I could just picture some unnamed governor sloshing through the seawater in the streets there saying, I don't notice anything. Do you notice anything? But anyway, while I was there, at the next governor's conference, you can tell him I did not use his name, Scott, but while I was there, one of the founders of the National Tea Party movement came. Her name is Debbie Dooley, and she's head of the Atlanta Tea Party. And she got a request from the Koch brothers through the American Legislative Exchange Council. I don't think any of y'all are members of that. I hope not. And they do the polluters bidding and whatnot. And they said, okay, we've got this legislation introduced in 34 states to put a tax on solar panels. And she said, well, I just put them on my roof. And they said, well, let us explain it to you. And they tried to explain it to her. She said, no, I don't think so. And she went to meet with the head of the Sierra Club in Atlanta, and they formed a new joint group named, wait for it, the Green Tea Party. True story. And they went and lobbied the Georgia legislature not only to defeat that tax, but to remove some of the other restrictions against solar panels. While I was she spoke at my event in Miami and rallied the Tea Party folks. And while I was there, the head of the Christian Coalition based in South Carolina endorsed the solar revolution, said we need to push hard on this, people need solar. Because the cost is coming down. I've only been in the business world for 14 years, but one of the things I've learned is that apparently when you've got a new product or technology, it makes a difference if it's more expensive than or cheaper than the competition. And I didn't understand that, but once it becomes cheaper than the alternative, a lot of things change. It's kind of like the difference between 32 degrees and 33 degrees, more than 1 degree. It's the difference between ice and water, and in markets, it's the difference between markets that are frozen up and markets that are liquid with investment capital flowing. Right here in New York City, Bloomberg New Energy Finance reported that 4 years ago, for the first time in world history, new investments in renewable energy, solar and wind principally, exceeded that in fossil fuels. This year, the gap has widened. So New York State's leadership under Governor Cuomo to get out in front of this and at the same time work on making it possible for everybody to win, it really is historic. Now back to this article. Here's what this fellow says. It said a lot of states are beginning to deal with this. Several are taking steps to reform how their utilities work. None, however, are going at it with the speed and gusto of New York. Under the leadership of Governor Andrew Cuomo, New York is undertaking an astonishingly comprehensive and ambitious effort to remake its energy systems and reduce its carbon emissions. It goes on, but I want to read you just one other expert. This guy is not in the tank for the governor. He could care less, believe me. Here's what he says. New York is walking a high wire and everyone is watching. Across the country, lawmakers, regulators, utility executives, and grid geeks are closely tracking the progress of New York REV, R-E-V. It is not the only effort at utility reform underway, but it is the biggest and in many ways the cleanest. To a remarkable extent, the process thus far has been free of the usual poisonous politics that surround utilities in other states. That takes leadership, ladies and gentlemen, to rise above the poisonous politics and bring people together to get progress. It's really extremely well done, and thank you to the members of the legislature for making that possible. So I bragged on you, and it's all justified, Governor. But you know, just today, yet another governor of South Carolina, Nikki Haley, I gained a lot of respect for her, the way she handled that church shooting. I thought it was really very moving. But anyway, she just announced this morning that many more thousands of people are being ordered today to evacuate from parts of South Carolina. They got 11 trillion gallons of rainfall in the Carolinas over the last few days. It blew through the once in a 1,000-year level, and now they're trying to calculate. Of course, all the statistics are off now. It wasn't that long ago that my hometown of Nashville had a once in a 1,000-year rainfall. Earlier this year, Houston, Texas, got more rainfall in 2 days than the entire flow of Niagara Falls for 2.5 days. Why is this happening over and over and over again? Meanwhile, California, our largest state, is in 97% in a drought, half in an exceptional drought. Their reservoirs are empty. Sao Paulo, the largest city in the Western Hemisphere, in an epic, historic multi-year drought. 140 cities in Brazil in rationing. Southern Africa in a record drought. We're seeing the sea level rise not only in southern Florida. Fish were swimming in the streets of Fort Lauderdale this past week. Norfolk, the largest naval base in the world, is going to have to move because of sea level rise. Bangladesh, millions already on the move. We see these refugees. Of course, there are multiple causes, but why is it that the Pentagon warned 2 years ago that we're going to see refugee crises because of climate enhancement? There was a climate-related historic drought in Syria from 2006 to 2010. And in WikiLeaks, they released the internal conversations of the Syrian officials saying, we can't handle this. 60% of the farms destroyed, 80% of the livestock killed, 1.5 million climate refugees driven into the cities, and the officials are saying, what are we going to do? This is going to cause an explosion. And yes, there are other factors, but all of the experts are saying that this is just a taste of what would come if we don't get our arms around this and get busy and solve this. We are putting 110 million tons of global warming pollution into the atmosphere every single day. And it's just a thin shell surrounding the earth, and it's mounting up. We tell the big polluters, you want a free sewage system for your waste? Just spew it into the atmosphere free of charge. It's kind of like a giant sewer. We don't care. The cumulative amount of man-made global warming now traps as much extra heat energy every day as would be released by 400,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every 24 hours. It's a big planet, but that is a lot of energy. Most of it goes into the oceans, and one of the main reasons why Superstorm Sandy was as strong as it was it passed over ocean waters 9 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than normal on its way to New York City and New Jersey. Super Typhoon Haiyan 1 year ago, same thing as it crossed the Pacific toward Tacloban, 4 million refugees. Pope Francis went there right afterwards and talked about the climate crisis, and he made a moving speech at the United Nations. It was wonderful, and we've seen President Obama take leadership, and we've seen Shell withdraw its drilling venture in the Arctic. We are winning this contest. We are winning this struggle. We are going to prevail. But ladies and gentlemen, the reason we're going to prevail is that a few people in particular have stood up and taken the initiative, and have buckled down and done the hard work on complex challenges, not like this New York REV plan that everybody's bragging about. They're wondering, how can Governor Cuomo do this when so many states are just finding it too complicated? He understands government. He understands how to get things done. And I'm just, as a friend, I'm just thrilled with the step that's being taken today. And again, taking the governor's lead, I want to share it fully with all this praise with the state legislature. This is a very important day. When the nations of the whole world meet in Paris, the commitments they make are going to make a real step forward globally. China, for years, some of the opponents of action have said, why should we do anything? China's not doing anything. China's already initiated a cap and trade program. They may have already reached peak coal. It's too early to say. But, well, of course, they can't breathe. They've got to do something because of the other pollution that's dropped life expectancy 5.5 years in northern China. India just announced a 40% renewable goal by 2030. This is an amazing step forward. The European Union. So the big four are now all moving in concert, and nations everywhere are paying attention. But some of the most dramatic progress that is actually pushing the nations along, I think of Ontario and Quebec, for example, is coming from the state level and from the provincial level. And now, with today's announcement, we see the beginning of an entirely new era. No longer is it just California. Now, New York State, the giant of the eastern part of the United States, the Empire State, which will bring with it so many other states as it begins and goes along this path, is going to really make it possible to have North America be in the lead. So I'll close with this comment. For anybody who's ever been tempted to feel despair over whether or not we could get our act together on this, the evidence that you're wrong in being cynical is being played out on this stage right here today. Always remember that political will is itself a renewable resource. Thank you, Governor Cuomo, for what you're doing.
And now the governor will sign the MOU, witnessed by the Vice President.
gentlemen, please, you want to come right this way? Hey, thank you, Mr. President. Well hosted, well done. Adirondack, thank you. Governor, let's go fishing. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Uh,